Good evening, and thank you for being here with us tonight. I want to begin with something that may sound small on the surface, just a statement, just a few words spoken in the heat of a political exchange, but which, when you listen closely, reveals something much bigger, something consequential about where our politics are right now, about what is at stake for our democracy, and about why certain voices resonate the way they do. That statement came from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. You may have seen the clips circulate online. You may have heard snippets replayed on cable news or cut into 30-second reels on social media. But what I want us to do tonight is something different. I want us to take it seriously. I want us to take the time to really listen, to hear what was said, to put it in context, and to understand why it hit such a nerve knot just with her political opponents, but with Americans across the spectrum who are paying attention to the direction of this country. Now, Congresswoman Crockett is a first-term Democrat representing Texas's 30th congressional district based in Dallas. She's an attorney by training, a civil rights lawyer. She's not a bomb thrower in the traditional sense. She's thoughtful, deliberate. And let's be honest, she's one of the newer voices in Congress that a lot of Americans are still getting to know. So why did her statement draw so much attention? Why did it cause, frankly, such a visceral reaction, including from me, I'll admit, when I first watched it in real time? Let's start by playing the tape. Pause as though clip plays what you just heard is representative. Crockett responding to a Republican colleague during a heated committee exchange. And in that moment, she distilled a frustration, a sense of urgency that millions of Americans feel but often do not hear articulated in the halls of Congress. Her words were not only a defense of democratic principles, they were a blunt acknowledgement of what is at stake if we continue down the road of authoritarian drift in this country. Now, I want to be clear about something at the outset. This is not about personalities. This is not about whether you like or dislike Jasmine Crockett, whether you agree with her politics, or even whether you voted for her. What we are doing tonight is examining what her statement tells us about the state of American democracy. Why those of us who care about facts, about institutions, about the rule of law, we should be paying attention. Because history teaches us something very simple. Democracy does not collapse all at once. It does not fall because of one election or one bill or one speech. It falls by degrees. It falls when voices of warning are ignored, when small transgressions are normalized, when rhetoric hardens into violence, and when those who see what is happening fail to call it out. Jasmine Crockett called it out, loudly, and yes, emotionally. And maybe that's what startled people, because we are so used to sanitized political language, so used to euphemisms, so used to Washington doublespeak, that when someone breaks through with clarity, it almost feels shocking. Think back, for example, to Barbara Jordan, another towering voice from Texas, who in the 1970s spoke with moral clarity during the Watergate hearings. She didn't yell, she didn't dramatize, but she cut through the fog of excuses with a conviction that people still remember decades later. Jasmine Crockett's statement is not Barbara Jordan's, it's different in tone, in style, but it comes from a similar place. It is the insistence that democracy requires defenders, and that silence in the face of authoritarianism is complicity. Now let's talk about the reaction. When that clip aired, conservative commentators immediately dismissed it as hysterical. They said it was performative. They said it was unprofessional. They said it was unbecoming of a member of Congress. Let's pause right there, because the gendered nature of those criticisms is impossible to ignore. Women in politics have always faced that double standard. If they are calm and measured, they are dismissed as weak. If they are passionate and forceful, they are derided as shrill, and Jasmine Crockett, as a black woman in Congress, faces an even steeper climb against those stereotypes. The fact that she chose in that moment not to temper her words, not to sand off the edges,
Peace.
the Predator show that is significant. It is significant not because of how it looked on TV, but because of what it revealed about the stakes of the debate itself. So let's put this in context. What was the underlying issue she was addressing? The broader subject was the rule of law, specifically the ongoing attempts by some in Congress to normalize conduct by political figures that, in any previous era, would have been considered disqualifying. We are talking about disregard for subpoenas, defiance of ethics rules, attempts to undermine investigations, and, yes, efforts to rewrite the narrative of January 6th as though it were just another day in Washington. Congresswoman Crockett's statement was a direct rebuke to that normalization. She was saying enough pretending that these are small infractions, enough pretending that authoritarian impulses are just partisan differences of opinion, enough treating attacks on democratic norms as though they are the same thing as a disagreement over tax policy. And let me tell you why this matters. Because authoritarianism, when it takes root, always begins with excuses. Always. It begins with the idea that our side is allowed to break the rules because we are right. It begins with the claim that institutions can be bent to serve partisan ends. And once you accept that logic, once you allow that precedent, there is no limiting principle. There is no stopping point. Jasmine Crockett, in that committee room, was screaming against that slide. And frankly, I screamed along with her, because the alternative is silence. The alternative is complacency. The alternative is letting the erosion of democracy become background noise. Now, I want to broaden this lens a little, because one of the things we try to do on this program is not just cover the news of the day, but place it in historical perspective. And when I hear a freshman congresswoman raise her voice like that, I think about the long line of voices in American history who, in moments of crisis, refused to stay quiet. Think about the abolitionists in the 19th century. Think about the suffragists who demanded the right to vote. Think about the civil rights leaders in the 1960s who, when told to wait, when told to calm down, when told to moderate their demands, responded by raising their voices louder. Democracy has always been expanded, always been defended by people who were willing to be told they were too loud, too forceful, too disruptive, and here we are again. A moment when the very idea of free and fair elections is under assault. A moment when political violence is no longer theoretical. A moment when those in positions of power toy openly with authoritarian rhetoric. And into that breach steps Jasmine Crockett saying, "Not on my watch." Now, I know some people will roll their eyes at that. They'll say, "Oh, come on, Rachel. It's just one clip, just one congresswoman. It's not a turning point." And maybe they're right in one sense. History does not usually turn on a single soundbite. But history is made up of moments like this, moments when someone decides not to bite their tongue, moments when someone chooses clarity over caution. And those moments accumulate. They create a record. They signal to others that they are not alone. And here's the other thing. People are hungry for honesty. They are hungry for plain-spoken truth. They are tired of politicians who talk like consultants, who measure every word, who act as if the goal of politics is simply to avoid risk. Jasmine Crockett took a risk. And in doing so, she gave voice to what millions of Americans are feeling, the sense that our democracy is teetering, and that polite conversation is not enough to save it. So tonight, we are going to spend time with this. We are going to unpack it, not because of the personalities involved, but because of the principles at stake. And we are going to look at what it means when members of Congress, especially newer members, especially those who are not household names, begin to raise their voices in defense of democracy. Because I believe, and I think you do too, that these voices matter. They are the frontline defense against authoritarianism. And that when they scream, we should not dismiss them. We should listen.